Before you decide this message isn't about you, let me ask you something. What if the reason you're still single has very little to do with the people you've dated, the circumstances you faced, or simple bad luck, and everything to do with a pattern formed so early in your life that you've never once questioned it? What if, without ever consciously realizing it, you've been unconsciously selecting partners, or unconsciously sabotaging relationships that could have worked, based on a blueprint for love that was written before you were even old enough to remember? Most people believe being single is either a matter of circumstance or a matter of standards. Either the right person simply hasn't appeared yet, or they're holding out for something that doesn't exist. But there is a third explanation, far less discussed and far more common than most people realize: an unhealed attachment style, quietly running in the background of every romantic decision, determining who feels safe to approach, who feels safe to stay with, and who, without any conscious intention, gets pushed away before things can go any further. Right now, you may be caught in exactly this pattern without fully recognizing it. Perhaps you find yourself drawn almost exclusively to people who are emotionally unavailable, then wonder why closeness never seems to last. Perhaps you find yourself pulling away the moment someone shows genuine interest, sabotaging connection precisely when it starts to feel real. Perhaps you find yourself needing so much reassurance that potential partners eventually feel overwhelmed and retreat, confirming the very fear that drove the need for reassurance in the first place. These patterns are not random, and they are not evidence of some fundamental flaw in your character. They are the direct result of an attachment style formed in early childhood, shaped by your first relationships with caregivers, that continues operating largely outside conscious awareness in every relationship you form as an adult. But before you assume this pattern is simply something you're stuck with permanently, there's something more important to understand. This isn't just a story about being trapped by an early wound. It's about the very real, well-documented possibility of actually healing attachment patterns, not through simply understanding them intellectually, but through specific, deliberate practices that genuinely rewire how your nervous system approaches closeness and connection. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand your own patterns, your relationship history, and the concrete steps available to you to finally interrupt a cycle that has likely been running far longer than you've been consciously aware of it. Have you ever found yourself repeating the exact same relationship dynamic with someone new, wondering how, despite choosing an entirely different person, you somehow ended up in a familiar, painful pattern once again? Attachment theory, one of the most well-researched frameworks in psychology, describes how the quality of care a person received in early childhood shapes their fundamental expectations about closeness, safety, and connection in all future relationships. Understanding your specific attachment style offers significant insight into exactly what may be keeping you single or repeatedly struggling in relationships. Secure attachment develops when early caregivers were reliably responsive and emotionally available, teaching a child that closeness is generally safe, that their needs matter, and that relationships can be trusted to remain stable. Adults with secure attachment tend to approach relationships with relative ease, able to communicate needs directly, trust reasonably appropriate closeness, and handle relational conflict without excessive anxiety or avoidance. Anxious attachment often develops when early caregiving was inconsistent, sometimes warm and responsive, sometimes distant or unavailable, teaching a child that love is unpredictable and must be actively monitored and pursued to ensure it doesn't disappear. Adults with anxious attachment often struggle with intense fear of abandonment, a persistent need for reassurance, difficulty trusting stability even when it's genuinely present, and a tendency to become preoccupied with a partner's behavior and availability, sometimes to the point of overwhelming partners with the intensity of that need. Avoidant attachment often develops when early caregiving was consistently distant, dismissive of emotional needs, or discouraged genuine dependence, teaching a child that self-sufficiency is safer than relying on others, and that emotional needs are better managed independently than expressed and potentially disappointed. Adults with avoidant attachment often struggle with genuine emotional intimacy, tend to value independence to a degree that makes real closeness difficult, and frequently experience an internal urge to create distance precisely when a relationship begins deepening beyond a certain comfortable point. Disorganized attachment, sometimes considered a combination of anxious and avoidant patterns, often develops from early caregiving that was frightening, unpredictable, or itself a source of both comfort and fear simultaneously. Adults with disorganized attachment often experience significant internal conflict around closeness, simultaneously longing for connection while also fearing it intensely, leading to particularly confusing and difficult relationship patterns that can feel contradictory even to the person experiencing them. If you've recognized yourself, even partially, in one or more of these descriptions, understand that this recognition is not a diagnosis of permanent limitation. Attachment styles, while genuinely influential, are patterns that form through specific early experiences, and patterns formed through experience can, with deliberate effort, be meaningfully changed through different, corrective experiences pursued consciously in adulthood. Each attachment style tends to interfere with forming and maintaining relationships in distinct, identifiable ways, and understanding the specific mechanism relevant to your own pattern offers significant insight into what has actually been happening in your romantic history. For those with predominantly anxious attachment, singlehood often results from a combination of specific patterns. There may be a tendency to become overwhelming too quickly in new relationships, moving toward intensity and commitment faster than the natural pace of a developing connection can support, which can inadvertently push away partners who need more gradual development of trust and closeness. There may also be a pattern of choosing avoidant partners specifically, drawn to their initial composure and independence, only to become caught in an exhausting cycle of pursuit and retreat that rarely resolves into stable, mutual connection. For those with predominantly avoidant attachment, singlehood often results from a pattern of unconscious sabotage precisely when relationships begin deepening. This might look like finding sudden, seemingly logical reasons to end promising connections just as genuine intimacy starts to develop, prioritizing independence and self-sufficiency to a degree that makes it difficult for potential partners to feel truly needed or valued, or maintaining such significant emotional distance that partners eventually lose interest or give up trying to build genuine closeness. For those with disorganized attachment, singlehood often results from particularly confusing, contradictory patterns, pursuing closeness intensely and then abruptly withdrawing without clear explanation, alternating between periods of significant vulnerability and sudden defensive retreat, or unconsciously choosing partners who recreate the same unpredictable, sometimes painful dynamics experienced in early childhood. Patterns that feel familiar despite being genuinely unhealthy. It's worth noting that even those with generally secure attachment can experience periods of singlehood related to specific circumstances or life stages, but their overall relationship patterns tend to be considerably more stable and functional than those significantly influenced by anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment styles. Recognizing your own specific pattern within these broader categories, rather than simply understanding attachment theory abstractly, is an important first step toward genuinely addressing what has actually been keeping you single, moving from vague self-criticism about being bad at relationships toward a much more precise, actionable understanding of exactly what needs to change. It's important to be honest about something many people misunderstand regarding attachment healing. Simply learning about your attachment style intellectually, while a valuable first step, is rarely sufficient on its own to produce genuine, lasting change in how you actually behave within relationships. Attachment patterns are not primarily stored as conscious beliefs that can be corrected through logical argument or new information alone. They are largely stored as implicit, body-based expectations, formed before a person had significant conscious, verbal understanding of their experience, and reinforced through years of repeated relational patterns that became deeply automatic and largely unconscious over time. This is why many people report understanding their attachment style clearly, sometimes for years, while continuing to repeat the exact same relational patterns despite that intellectual understanding. Knowing that you have anxious attachment does not automatically prevent the anxiety from arising the next time a partner doesn't respond to a text as quickly as expected. Knowing that you have avoidant attachment does not automatically prevent the urge to create distance the next time a relationship begins feeling significantly close. Genuine healing requires something beyond intellectual understanding, repeated, embodied, corrective experience that gradually teaches your nervous system a different pattern than the one originally learned in childhood. This is a slower, more experimental process than simply acquiring new information, though understanding remains a genuinely important foundation that makes this deeper, more experimental work possible and more effectively directed. This distinction matters significantly because it explains why many people feel frustrated after learning about attachment theory, expecting that understanding alone should produce change, and then feeling discouraged when old patterns continue despite genuine intellectual insight. Understanding your pattern is the necessary first step, but genuine healing requires additional, more experimental work beyond simply knowing the pattern exists. Genuinely healing attachment patterns, whether anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, tends to require several specific types of ongoing practice, each addressing different aspects of how these patterns operate. Working with a therapist trained specifically in attachment-focused approaches provides significant structured support for this process. Therapeutic modalities that directly address attachment patterns, rather than simply general talk therapy, can help identify the specific origins of your pattern, process the original experiences that shaped it, and provide a genuinely corrective relational experience within the therapeutic relationship itself, one that models a different, more secure way of relating than what was originally learned. Practicing self-regulation techniques specifically targeted at the physiological anxiety or avoidance response your attachment style produces is another significant component. For those with anxious attachment, this often involves developing concrete techniques for self-soothing during moments of relational anxiety, rather than immediately seeking external reassurance, gradually building genuine internal capacity to tolerate uncertainty without becoming overwhelmed by it. For those with avoidant attachment, this often involves developing concrete techniques for tolerating the discomfort that arises during increasing intimacy, gradually building capacity to stay present with closeness rather than immediately retreating from it. Seeking out and consciously choosing relationships or friendships with securely attached individuals provides valuable, ongoing corrective experience. Securely attached people tend to offer consistent, non-anxious, non-avoidant responses that, over time and repeated exposure, can genuinely help recalibrate your own nervous system's expectations about closeness, gradually providing evidence that contradicts the original insecure pattern's underlying assumptions. Practicing direct, honest communication about your attachment patterns within current or developing relationships, rather than allowing the patterns to operate silently and automatically, can also support significant change. This might involve directly naming your anxious need for reassurance to a partner rather than acting it out indirectly, or directly acknowledging your avoidant urge to withdraw rather than simply disappearing without explanation. This kind of direct communication, while initially uncomfortable, tends to produce far better relational outcomes than allowing attachment patterns to drive behavior without any accompanying awareness or explanation offered to the people affected by it. Consistent journaling or reflective practice specifically focused on identifying your attachment patterns in real time, noticing the specific thoughts and physical sensations that arise during moments of relational anxiety or avoidance, gradually builds the kind of self-awareness necessary to eventually interrupt these patterns before they fully take over your behavior in the moment. It's worth being genuinely honest about something important regarding the timeline of attachment healing. While consistent, deliberate practice can produce meaningful change more quickly than most people expect, particularly compared to leaving these patterns entirely unaddressed. Genuine attachment healing is rarely instantaneous, and claims suggesting complete transformation within days or weeks should be approached with appropriate skepticism. What healing fast realistically means is beginning to notice measurable shifts, increased capacity to catch yourself in the midst of an anxious or avoidant pattern, increased ability to tolerate discomfort without immediately acting on old automatic responses, gradually improving relational outcomes, within a period of consistent, deliberate practice measured in weeks and months rather than years, particularly compared to patterns left completely unaddressed that can otherwise persist, unchanged indefinitely. This distinction matters because unrealistic expectations about instant transformation often lead to premature discouragement. Someone attempting these practices for a short period, becoming frustrated that old patterns haven't disappeared entirely, and abandoning the effort before genuine, cumulative change has had sufficient time to develop. Understanding that meaningful progress, while achievable more quickly than many people assume, still requires sustained, consistent effort over a genuine period of time helps maintain the persistence necessary for lasting change to actually take hold. The good news within this realistic timeline is that attachment patterns, unlike some deeply embedded psychological patterns, tend to be genuinely responsive to consistent, deliberate intervention, particularly when that intervention combines therapeutic support, concrete self-regulation practice, and intentional exposure to corrective relational experiences. This combination tends to produce measurably faster progress than relying on any single approach alone, or than simply waiting passively for patterns to change without active, ongoing effort. While the immediate motivation for this work often centers specifically on romantic singlehood or relationship struggles, it's worth understanding that genuine attachment healing tends to produce significant benefits extending well beyond romantic relationships specifically. Attachment patterns influence far more than romantic connection alone. They shape friendships, family relationships, professional dynamics, and even your fundamental relationship with yourself. Someone with significant anxious attachment often experiences related anxiety in friendships or professional relationships, not only romantic ones. Someone with significant avoidant attachment often struggles with genuine closeness across multiple areas of life, not exclusively within romantic partnerships. This means the work you invest in healing your attachment patterns tends to produce benefits that ripple across your entire life: improved friendships, healthier family dynamics, increased capacity for genuine collaboration and trust in professional settings, and, significantly, an improved relationship with yourself, less driven by anxious self-doubt or avoidant self-protection, more grounded in genuine self-acceptance and security. This broader benefit is worth remembering specifically because it means this work holds genuine value regardless of your current romantic relationship status. Even if healing your attachment pattern does not immediately or directly result in finding a specific partner, the internal security and relational capacity you build through this process remains genuinely valuable, benefiting every meaningful relationship in your life, including, importantly, your relationship with yourself. If you've recognized your own pattern within this message, whether anxious, avoidant, disorganized, or some combination that doesn't fit neatly into a single category, understand that this recognition, uncomfortable as it might be, represents genuine progress. You cannot change a pattern you haven't yet clearly identified, and the clarity you've gained today is a meaningful first step toward the deeper, more experimental work that can genuinely transform how you approach closeness and connection moving forward. Your attachment style was never a permanent life sentence, and it was never evidence of a fundamental flaw in who you are. It was an adaptive response to specific early experiences, one that served an important protective function at the time, but that no longer needs to continue determining your romantic future now that you have both the awareness and the concrete tools available to genuinely address it. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this message resonated with your own experience, I hope it offered a little clarity about a pattern that may have felt confusing or discouraging for a very long time, and genuine hope about the real, achievable possibility of healing it. This has been the Archetype Awakening. I hope this video helped you understand your own patterns with more compassion and precision, and reminded you that the version of you capable of secure, lasting love is not something you need to find outside yourself. It's something you can actively build, one deliberate, consistent step at a time. Wishing you the courage to face your own patterns honestly, the patience to heal them with consistent effort, and the deep, secure love you deserve, both in your future relationships and, most importantly, within yourself. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next video.